Hey YouTube friends, it's Roger and Vaughan here from We Made This Up.
And we wanted to take you through our story planner workshop that we used for what would eventually become the story that Roger wrote about the middle. If you haven't watched that yet, we've linked to it in the description, so feel free to check that out first.
This was an interesting one because in the previous workshop I was on my own and I had to juggle between being both the facilitator and the creator. But for this workshop, Vaughan joined me as my co-facilitator.
In that way, Roger could lean more into just being creative and get what he truly wanted all along, to be the talent and have someone to boss around, namely me. Get and collect ideas.
For this first exercise, we kicked around a lot of ideas of what the concept of the middle means. And while exploring the concept of the friction caused between two opposing forces, the image of a rope popped into my head.
An image that remained forever burnt into his mind.
I know I had to convince Vaughan a bit the story about a rope could be interesting, but I'd fallen head over heels in love with the idea. One of the awesome things about being a creator, sometimes you just need to follow your gut and trust that you're onto something valuable.
Sort and group ideas.
Because we had an explosion of ideas in the previous exercise,
Kaboom.
It was a bit trickier now to sort through all of them. Many of the ideas spanned several groups.
But the workshop is more a guide than hard and fast rules. It's in the doing of something that you find out what that something truly is.
Or to make that sound less like a self-help book, we're trying to find a path to the story in a dark forest. So just try everything at first. In this case, while grouping the ideas, the rope image continued to dominate my thoughts, like all I wanted to do was focus on it.
We get it. You were a man in love with a rope.
Grouping ideas really helped me clearly see that this was the idea I wanted to work with. Another thing we tried this time compared to the first workshop is how the story needed to focus more on the relationship of the creator and the story, as well as the audience and the story. So we blew up those bubbles this time
Kaboom.
with the intention of expanding and exploring them. But the rope idea was so fierce that this took a back seat eventually.
And that's okay, as long as when it happens, one still fills in the exercise at hand to ensure one has considered everything.
One must do so indeed. After that, following the burst of inspiration and excitement can do more in revealing the story, so that got priority this time.
Define and rank ideas.
Usually, at this point in the workshop, we'd still be exploring different ideas, but since the rope analogy was so dominant in my brain, we used this exercise to focus instead on the different symbolisms a rope could have. And then we could choose the most meaningful symbolism and continue to build the story around that. It ended up that we enjoyed the concept of a rope representing insecurities. That would be a step towards uncovering the real underlying theme we chose, how reframing a vulnerability can change it to be a strength.
Name and own the idea.
Now, Vaughan loves puns.
I really do.
But he's really terrible at making them.
Hey, you just hate puns, that's all.
And yet, I'm really good at making them. So sadly, I have to confess that I was responsible for this story's original title, No, It's Not. Spelt K-N-O-T.
He thought it was so clever because the theme is about reframing, about not accepting an outcome at face value and looking deeper.
Luckily for my pun-hating heart and the sake of the world, I came to my senses later about this title.
This exercise was where we really started to understand what attracted Roger to the theme and the idea of a rope. While we knew it would be about reframing, we had to work through all these steps to simplify that concept.
I remember thinking immediately, yes, that's it.
Ding ding. Convert idea into statement.
This was quite straightforward to do because by this stage we had thoroughly explored the theme and its layers. Still, getting the exact wording was important. I think the reason that changing the way you look at something changes the thing worked so well was because that it allowed for that aha moment where something was one way for the longest time, but just by changing the perspective, it turns into something else.
And not only is that just like how a rope can be different things, it's also how the middle of a story can be reframed by the story preceding and following it. Define the role players.
This exercise could definitely be easier, but the rewards are worth the head scratching. The biggest challenge was determining what group or person would suffer if the protagonist were to change perspective. In other words, figuring out who would be the antagonist. Because of that initial challenge, we only came to understand the antagonist last, even though we were able to come up with the opposite of our statement first. We would also use a different language here, speaking more about the concept of changing perspective.
If that all sounds strange, let's just say we got a little bit ethereal. Ooh. But it's all part of the process, and was in keeping with the nature of the story Roger wanted to tell.
Remember that there's no right or wrong. It's about defining and refining ideas at this stage. It's too early in the workshop to get precious about anything specific.
Well, except for one man's love for ropes. That will never change. Define statement contrasts.
This exercise is another one that could be clearer. The examples provided in the workshop led us a bit astray, and in the end we just used the opposite words in the same place as the theme statement. The result was no less enlightening and really set us up for success with the next exercise.
Define statement theme.
This exercise was quite a bit of fun with the two contrasting statements at the root. It was simple enough to extract the essence of what was important.
Understand motivation.
We didn't fill in this exercise to the extent that it should have been. By this time, the creative energies had run a little low. However, it was still valuable in us focusing on the core questions that needed to be considered and their nearest neighbors. I'm talking about the red cards. Answering the questions near these cards really helps define some of the critical parts of our story. However, not fleshing out the motivation here would bite me in the bum later during the writing process.
Create theme actors. Choose major POV. Because Roger had decided quite early on in the workshop that the story would be focused on the protagonist point of view, the rope, we didn't need to do this exercise of exploring all the other characters' motivations. For larger stories, though, with multiple characters, this is a vital part of the workshop.
I was raring to write, which is a great feeling and the main goal of the workshop, to get you inspired.
Wrapping up.
All in all, creating this story was a bit of a mixed bag. On one hand, I was dealing with a very strong gut instinct that I had early on in the workshop, where I wanted to write a story about a rope contemplating the friction between its two opposing sides. On the other hand, there was a lot more I could have explored further in various workshop exercises, and if I had done so, I probably would have an easier time writing the eventual story.
And from my side, I think the workshop really helped provide the brainstorming environment for Roger to even think of the idea of a rope as a main character, something he likely would never have done otherwise. Meanwhile, the exercises helped me, as the facilitator, to confirm that that was indeed what he wanted the story to be about. Those exercises are like a safety net of, are you sure you've thought about this, and this, and this? Developing a theme for a story centered on such a non-human protagonist can be quite a challenge, but the workshop guided us every step of the way. So that's us for today. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions or want to know more about any part of the workshop, do let us know in the comments. It's always great to hear from you.
If you like what you saw, please hit the like button and share with anyone else who enjoys all things that go into building a story. We're growing a story crafting community, so if you like what we're doing and can spare some finances, we have a link in the description where you can donate to the cause.
Here at We Made This Up, we're always refining the workshop and developing new stories, so hit the subscribe button so that you don't miss any of it.
Thanks for spending time with us. Catch you next time, friends.